Just to say that it's a great pleasure to welcome Cecilia to the UK. I was very lucky last year to be able to work with her over in Argentina, and I just fell in love with her energy and enthusiasm. So I'm not going to take up any more time, just to say welcome very much to, as Paul mentioned, the first of our two LTSIG Scholarship winners. So, welcome to Cecilia.
Thank you. Well, hello everybody. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much, Pete, for the warm welcome and introduction. I'm very grateful to have been awarded this scholarship by the Learning Technologies SIG, which has made it possible for me to attend IATEFL for the first time in my life and to be presenting here. So I feel deeply honored. Okay, my talk today is going to be about live online learning. So, okay, there we go. Strategies for live online learning. And this is based on my experience. I was just having a little chat with some of you this morning, asking how much experience you had as regards live online learning. And it seems that we all have gone through the same thing. It's like we are teaching ourselves how to teach, how to transform ourselves into live online teachers after teaching successfully in a totally different environment. And perhaps what we find is that we've got the core skills that teachers need, principally as regards our knowledge of the pedagogy, but then the online learning environment is a totally different context, and we have new skills that we have to learn as we take up this new role. Before you start, I would just like to know how many of you are currently involved in live online teaching. Could you raise your hands, please? Okay, quite a few. Then perhaps we might share your experiences as well. We might chat about it. How about blended learning, perhaps more asynchronous learning? How many of you are involved in that? Okay, quite a few more. Okay, and how many of you are currently using technology to teach in your classes? I suppose all of you, that's why you must be here. Okay, well, very good. So let's get started. Well, this is an overview of the session. We're going to start by discussing the process and the challenges of becoming a live online tutor. I'm going to share with you some theoretical framework as regards my own experience. And then I'm going to show, for this context, very briefly, some sample units and activities that we designed for a business English course that we had to transform from traditional face-to-face classroom teaching into a blended learning English course, including live online learning. And let me tell you a little bit about my hometown. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Buenos Aires is the third largest city in Latin America. It's the center of Buenos Aires, and the neighborhoods around the area have as many as 13 million inhabitants, and commuting can be quite a nightmare, especially in rush hour. Then I work in a language school, among other things, because I'm also a teacher trainer. I work in a language school with business English students in the southern suburbs of Buenos Aires. And we have quite an important corporate client, a German multinational company, whose students used to come to our language school to take classes after work, individually or in small groups, up to 6 people. And their industrial plant was just a few blocks away from the school, so it was very convenient for everybody. And one day, they decided to move to the northern suburbs, which was terrible news for the employees because that meant commuting a lot. They were also based in the southern suburbs. And for us in the school, it meant transforming these traditional face-to-face courses into blended learning courses with fewer contact hours, because these poor guys had now to spend perhaps an hour and a half or 2 hours a day commuting, and so they had less time for English lessons. So we had to transform them into a blended learning course with fewer contact hours and with the possibility of taking live online classes from the northern suburbs. So this is briefly to set the context, and from this experience, we faced many challenges and we learned many lessons, and this is what I would like to share with you. Okay. So we will go also through some technological tools that we used and tips for conducting live online classes. Well, learning to teach online, there are quite a few differences between the classroom environment and the live online, the virtual classroom. The first difference that we noticed is the lack of visual contact. Visual contact is so key to teachers because we are all the time looking at our students, trying to find visual cues to see whether they are engaged or not, to see whether we need to change the pace of the lesson or change the activity. And most of this is lost in the virtual class. Even though there is video and you may see your students' faces, it's not really the same as looking at your students in the eye in the language classroom. And the same happens to them as regards the teacher. Hello. Because your credibility in the class, in a traditional class, comes from your physical presence and from your body language. And then in the online learning environment, they can just see, your face. So we have to work out, we have to find other ways of transmitting all this and of reading the cues of engagement of the students. This was probably one of the most difficult challenges that we faced. And then using technology to communicate. I've got a metaphor here that perhaps learning to teach online, it's a little bit what happens to experienced drivers when you decide that you want to learn to ride a motorcycle. Okay, there are many core skills that you know, because then you have road awareness, you know that you have to look at the mirrors, you know how to brake, you know how to steer. However, you will need to develop a layer of, a new set of skills to layer on these core skills that in the case of teachers, it's our pedagogical skills, our knowledge of teaching. And then the other big challenge, apart from the change of environment, is the challenge that we all teachers face when we are introducing new technologies into the lesson. And it's not to keep track of, not to forget to keep track of the student and his needs in order to plan what we're going to do. And so let's get a little bit into the theoretical framework. Graham Stanley calls for a principled approach. It's very easy to get carried out by the bells and whistles of technology and forget that the learner is key in the process. So he says that what we need is a principled approach with learning at its heart, where teachers question how and when to integrate technology. So it's so very important not to forget the who for, the why, the what for, the where, the when and the how when you start designing material and units for the blended learning courses. So we wanted to have some kind of principles against which to check whatever we were doing in the blended course and in the live online classes, so as not to get carried away again by these bells and whistles provided by technology. And so what we did was we read about, or just reminded ourselves of what second language acquisition researchers are saying. There is a book by Brian Tomlinson, which is called Material Development for Language Teachers. And there, Brian Tomlinson's writes a compilation of principles that most researchers and teachers will agree are key in the language learning process. However, Tomlinson makes it clear that even though there is quite a lot of second language acquisition research, this has been going on for many, many decades right now, there is not complete agreement among researchers as regards what makes effective language learning. And then, there are people such as Stephen Krashen that mention that input is key. Others place more emphasis on output. But in spite of all this, Tomlinson manages to draw a set of principles which most second language acquisition researchers and teachers will agree contribute to language learning. This is not too long, and this was good material to make a checklist against which to, evaluate the activities and the materials we were providing our students with. So let's look at them briefly. It's something that we all know, but it's just a reminder for everybody of how important and how key pedagogy is when we set ourselves to teach with technology. So, meaningful, comprehensible input as a prerequisite for language acquisition. Notice the word prerequisite. Input is key, but not enough. We will need something else. And this is something that we have been discussing quite a lot in these conferences, the personalization and affect, and the need for learners to be engaged both affectively and cognitively with the language experience. Learners benefit from opportunities to use the language to achieve communicative purpose, and now we're getting more into output. Learners benefit from noticing salient features of the input, and then the role of the teacher in scaffolding, providing feedback, and working in the zone of proximal development with the students. So this is the checklist that we used when we set ourselves to design this blended language course. This is a blueprint for a sample unit which consists of one live online class, then some asynchronous work in a Moodle platform, a second online class, and all building on to a final class in which students are supposed to, a final task in which students are supposed to record themselves based on all the work done previously. So let me show you an example. Okay, for the live online class, we chose to use WizIQ in its free version, although there are other options that then we will discuss that in a minute. Are you acquainted with WizIQ? Yes. Yes? How many of you? Raise your hands, please. Well, so let me tell you briefly what this is about. This is a live online learning platform. As I told you, there is a free version and then there is a premium version, which I have never used. But basically, it's not expensive, and what you get with the paid version is the possibility, a few more add-ons, like having the possibility of having the class recorded, which is not completely necessary, and so we didn't use it. But then what you've got there is, well, an interactive whiteboard with all the features on the left, live audio and video streaming. You can see the students in the top right-hand corner. You've got a list of participants, a chat window, the possibility of when I left my pointer. Well, thank you very much. Thanks. Here, okay. The possibility of uploading material like PDF files or PowerPoint presentations to the virtual classroom and sharing them with students. You can even share your screen if you want to show them perhaps how to use some web tools. You've got a media player for video and for audio. And then something that I love about it is the possibility of having breakout rooms. That in the following screens I will show you how you can divide students into smaller pairs and visit each of the rooms as you give them a task, very much as when you do pair work in the classroom. A really useful facility. And for asynchronous learning, we used Moodle, although there are many other possibilities as well, even Facebook groups, Edmodo, wikis. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, let me show you very briefly a sample unit for this blended learning course. What were we basing ourselves on, first of all? First of all, what is the most important thing, technology or pedagogy? What do you think? No, it's the learner. The learner comes first. Yes, so the first thing is the learner and their needs. So when we designed this unit, our learners had told us that they were having a lot of problems trying to explain to their German bosses the complexity of the Latin American and Argentinian economic and political turmoil. Intermediate students, they lacked language resources and they found it very, very difficult to explain that. I don't know, even if they have been advanced, I think that they were going to have a lot of trouble. Nowadays, a very complex situation in Argentina. But well, this is what we wanted to work on. There was also a language topic, intermediate students, so we wanted to do a good revision of tenses. And this question of the political situation in Argentina was good because we had to focus on the present and also on the reasons that caused us to be in the situation we are in now, and a look at the future. So it was a wonderful topic to do some language practice with tenses. And we didn't choose a lot of materials. For this lesson, we very much like dogma at school, so we said, well, little material, and for input we used an article that was published in The Economist in January, that is called A Century of Decline for Argentina, very sad, and a video that was part of that article. The reading was quite challenging, but we used some techniques that you all know, working on vocabulary and predictions, in order to scaffold the comprehension of the students as regards the article, to provide them good input for the final task, which was recording themselves to talk about Argentina. 2-3 seconds of the video.
Florida Street in downtown Buenos Aires has long been a popular destination for people looking to buy football jerseys and cheap suitcases. Nowadays it's also the place to buy American dollars, something Argentines are fond of because unlike their own currency, the peso, dollars hold their value. Saving money has never been easy in Argentina. From 1944 to 2013,
it doesn't make sense to watch the whole of it now, but just to show you that it's something very much connected with the current situation. And this is a fragment of the article that was published in The Economist. Okay, so what did we do with this material? Very briefly, so that we go to the strategies. For the first live online class, I presented the topic, the learning aims, and the final task, which consisted, as I told you before, of having students record themselves talking about the current economic situation. There was a focus of vocabulary through prediction, and they had the first opportunity for output by discussing in small groups in the breakout rooms. There was feedback, ideas for improvement, input with the video that I have just shown you. Students confirmed or discarded their predictions, and the assignments for asynchronous learnings were set. We started with this Wordle. I will give you then a link where you will be able to find this Prezi and all the links of the things that I have used here, the web tools and the bibliography, so don't worry too much. So with these keywords, the instruction was to have students get into pairs and go to the breakout rooms in WizIQ. As you can see here, the teacher can create these sub-classrooms where students go, and then when you click on go to room, you can go as a teacher and listen to your students and help them and give them feedback. So it's very important to give them a time limit, yes, because one of the biggest dangers that we have in these live online classes is that they are so much easier to leave than perhaps a classroom like this. And to leave, I don't necessarily mean standing up and leaving, but then the greatest danger is multitasking, because you're alone at home in front of your computer, and then if the class gets boring, or if there isn't much to do, it's like, it's the same problems that you may have in a face-to-face online class. The only thing is that your students in the face-to-face class will probably stay there, but then in the live online class you don't have so much control, and then they will start multitasking. That is to say, an email pops up, and they look at the email, mobile phones, Twitter. So it's very important to set clear tasks, time limits. Okay, so you give them a time limit, a couple of minutes to discuss what's going on, what you think that these words refer to. I will be checking on you, I will be giving you feedback so that then you can present this to the rest of the class. Right, so that was the first opportunity for output. They present to the whole class. The whole class, it means 4 or 5 students, not much, so there were 2 presentations. And then the video was played to confirm predictions, and we set the assignments. The assignments, which they did asynchronously, consisted on watching the video again and going through vocabulary quizzes prepared by the teacher in the Moodle platform. And there was some output homework which consisted of some form of collaborative writing, again another form of input, writing about what they had been discussing. For the second live online class, they continue getting ready for the final task by talking about the article in small groups. And they had us to remember the language focus, which in this case was the tenses. Again, pairs report to the whole groups, questions and answers, and teachers' feedback. And finally, they go home and record themselves, this time with much more confidence, because as you may have noticed, there is quite a lot of task repetition and quite a lot of teachers' feedback, so that through this feedback and this task repetition, students can gain confidence and get better at expressing themselves. Why did we choose to record students? There are many advantages to recording speaking samples. It's so much easier to give feedback and assess. So what we did is they recorded themselves, and then we gave them feedback by recording ourselves. The teachers recorded themselves, giving them feedback, which was quite fast and also nice for the students then to listen to us, encouraging them and giving some tips for improvement. Also, the interesting thing is that learners tend to record themselves several times before they're happy. They've got a very strong motivation to perform well. One learner told me that he had recorded himself 19 times before he was happy, so that may sound a little bit exaggerated, but I know that each time he recorded himself it was better, so that implies learning. So there's increased confidence, and also recorded language samples become part of an e-portfolio, which is great not only for assessment, but also to show students how much they have progressed. Key at the intermediate level, when so many students suffer from the intermediate plateau and they believe that they have got stuck and they are not learning anything. Well, what platforms did we use for the live online class? I mentioned WizIQ. There is, I don't know if you know, Big Blue Button, which is an add-on to Moodle, and it's completely free, so that's also a good possibility. And then Skype and Google Hangouts are not really virtual classrooms, but they are good substitutes. And in fact, one good tip about live online classes is to come up with a disaster plan, and this disaster plan should be known to students, because technology can fail. So then, you have set up your beautiful class in WizIQ, and all of a sudden you don't know why WizIQ does not work, or sometimes students need to have something installed. It's good to provide them with perhaps screenshots of the installation process. Sometimes you need to install Flash in advance in your computers. So something might go wrong. So it's good to have some sort of backup plan apart from preparation and tutorials. In our case, we told our students that we were always going to be connected to a Skype account, and that they also had to have our Skype account and be added to ours. So if WizIQ failed, we had to quickly change to Skype. And as a last resort, we also used the telephone line. Okay. Here are some tools for recording learner spoken language samples. I will not go into those in detail. They are all mentioned in the handout. If you are not acquainted to them and if you want to learn more about them, I'm going to give you a little piece of advice. Just go to YouTube and type tutorial for Vocaroo or Meibu or whatever, and you will be able to teach yourself very easily how to use them. Some of them include videos, others don't. Okay, some quick, because there are just a couple of minutes left. Preparation is key, and it's so important to have clear aims and planning. Oops, sorry. Before starting, provide a learner's guide with including a disaster plan, as I told you. Reboot computers so that you start afresh. so that it's not slow, because if there are many things open, that may affect the speed. Try out audio, video, and microphone. When you are talking to students, remember that you don't have to look at your computer screen, but you have to look at the camera, because that's the way they will feel that there is visual contact. If you look at the computer, there's no visual contact at all. Yes, for audio, make sure that you've got a good set of, a good headset with microphone and a good internet connection, because if your speech is choppy, if there is an echo, this is very disruptive in the class. Try out before starting video, audio, and microphone. Upload all the material, your PPT presentations and your worksheets. Now, the stuff you know as a good classroom teachers, add variety, a lot of learner involvement, don't talk too much, a lot of student talking time, and make the facilities, use the facilities provided by the virtual classroom. How to keep students engaged and avoid the danger of multitasking? Well, and how to make up for the lack of visual contact. Audio. Let me tell you something about your voice. Teaching online is a little bit like using your voice a little bit like a radio broadcaster. You know, when you listen to the radio and you hear lively voices and enthusiastic voices, your tone of delivery shouldn't be too fast. Probably it should be a bit slower than in a classroom, because there is always a slight delay, but it shouldn't be too slow so as to bore students. So that's important. The chat window, you can, maybe when students are presenting, you've got a student presenting, encourage others to do things. The chat window is a good space to give feedback, to use emoticons, to write comments. Those are the emoticons. We mentioned the breakout rooms. There are polling facilities in all these virtual classrooms. This is very good to keep people doing something as well, giving their opinion in some other way. And with all these tools, you can gauge engagement, because if they take too long to respond, it's because they are doing something else. So all this makes up for the lack of visual contact. Okay, using the voice to engage learners, using effective slides. Well, don't put too much text on the slides. This is not a good one. Use more visuals. Visuals are very strong. Keep the sessions learner-centered. Give opportunities for participation. Call them by names. Make them learn by doing, and gauge involvement often. Well, here is the link to the bibliography and the different tools and my contact details. I don't know if we have some time for questions, but if anybody has any questions.